Hello and welcome to the Talk with Tariro. Today, our discussion on the program is looking at the issue of protection against sexual exploitation and abuse. And helping me to unpack that issue, I'm not sure whether we're talking about exploitation amongst adolescents or for us as adults. I have Florida Rumbi Peto, who is a communications officer with Adult Rape Clinic. Rumbi, welcome to the Talk.
Thank you for having me, Tari.
Yes, would want to find out from you when you're talking about protection against sexual exploitation and abuse. What exactly are you talking about?
Okay, so first I'm going to just explain sexual exploitation on its own, then maybe break down on what ARC is doing in terms of protection against such. So sexual exploitation, simply put, describes when a person uses their power to extort sexual favors from a person of a lesser power. So this could be a vulnerable person. This could be somebody who is in need of assistance, whether it's a humanitarian service, or this could be somebody who just needs help. It could be a job. It could be food. So that is sexual exploitation. And then in terms of protection against, now that's where people like the adult rape clinic come in, like what we do in terms of helping or assisting people who fall or are experiencing
When does it
such.
become exploitation? Maybe I'm the one who's saying, okay, in exchange of this, please give me, before we even go into the interventions that you implement, let's try and unpack this one now.
That level, that power, differential power that exists makes it exploitation. Because we always ask, one of the things that we always ask, especially with adolescents and young people, when they say, oh no, I'm in love with this person, we're in a relationship, because that exists. No, but this is my boyfriend. Yes, he's 10 years, 20 years older than me, but I'm in love with him. We always say, what is it that he does for you that you feel? Then you hear, now he buys me food, he does things for me, and then we ask, remove those things from the equation, remove the food, remove whatever favors this person is giving you. Would you still hold the same perception? Would you still love them? Would you? Then they start saying, no. So once that dynamic exists, that this person is saying, I'm agreeing, or I'm saying I want to have this relationship or sexual encounter with a person because I need something from them, or I'm in a desperate position, that then puts it in exploitation. Yes.
All right. And then you were saying you were not speaking to then how do you address the exploitation when it happens?
Okay, so from the ARC perspective, what we do is we are into service provision. That's number one, because we always emphasize on a survivor-centered approach. Survivors of sexual exploitation need emergency treatment. That is our first point of contact, because rape or sexual abuse is a medical emergency. So from our end, we're pushing the message that if this happens to you in any way, you need to report, you need to get the help that you need to rush to your nearest hospital or health facility and get treatment for HIV, STIs, and unwanted pregnancies. But we're also doing awareness, because the problem, or rather what makes this an isolated case, is because it happens even amongst humanitarian aid workers.
Wow.
So it's these people who are supposed to be working in communities and providing these services that are supposed to be educating the communities on, okay, when you have been raped, you need to get assistance. So what happens if it's that same person who's coming with this message that ends up violating the person that you're supposed to be giving information to? So it puts us in a bit of a predicament. But ours is now the message. That's why we're having these conversations now, that it doesn't matter who is doing it. Yeah. Even if it's a person who comes into your community. Right now, we've got a special isolated case of COVID-19.
Yes.
It's an emergency and a crisis situation, which the UN actually says exacerbates issues of sexual exploitation. Yeah. So mask shayotari can be a point yokuthi munhu anotoexploitwa for. Okay, I'm going to give you a sanitizer, but in order for me to give you the sanitizer, I first need to let's have sex, send me these pictures of yourself, let me have some sort of relationship with you. So we are sending a lot of messages out there that sexual abuse, it doesn't matter where it's coming from. It doesn't matter if it's this person who is supposed to give you the last standing oxygen tank in the country.
What happens where you often hear men arguing that she's the one who actually offered to say, give me this, and then in exchange, I'll do this? What then happens there?
Consent under duress is not consent. Consent because of desperation, because we can put that desperation under duress. This child wanted something. It's not because they wanted the sexual favor or the sexual encounter. That is not what they wanted. What they wanted were books.
Yeah.
So them deciding to give themselves in exchange of books doesn't then say there was consent. Because had they managed to get those books without having to encounter any sexual activity with this perpetrator, would they have made the same choice? If it's a no, then we are already removing consent from it. That was not consent. So from us, it's a conversation that is difficult. People always want to look for angles and say, but they gave themselves to me because. But the moment you realize that a person is giving themselves to you because they want something in return, you should ask yourself, and that's where we put accountability on the perpetrator. We should never, at any given point in time, find ourselves questioning or saying, but the survivor wanted this, so they could have agreed. No. They didn't want sex. They wanted a service. They wanted books. They wanted pens. They wanted food. They wanted a mask. They wanted a ventilator. They did not want sex. So our emphasis right now is moving from just awareness to trying to spend a lot of our time and messaging on the survivors, saying, oh, you should avoid getting raped. Or so are we going to tell people don't ask for help so that you don't get raped or you don't get sexually exploited? No, what we can do is emphasize on the perpetrators or would-be perpetrators and say, please, if you are not in a position to help somebody without expecting anything in return, then you are better off saying no or channeling them towards people that can help them instead of victimizing them. Because yes, this is a crime. You cannot take advantage of women and children for things that you should be giving them for free.
Definitely, that's the message. Let's not take advantage of women and children. Join us after the break. Welcome back. We continue with our discussion where today we are discussing the issue of protection against sexual exploitation and abuse. Rumbi, when we are looking at the various forms of exploitation that children are actually vulnerable to, could you unpack those for us?
Okay, so there are various kind of contexts to this. We've got one such case, I think it's a recent one, of a survivor who is an orphan. And already this is a vulnerable person. So in these orphanage homes, the people who come in and provide some sort of aid or help them say, in order for you to get food, or maybe it's double portions of food or porridge, you need to allow me to have sex with you. You need to allow me to at least touch you inappropriately. So reporting this survivor really gives an account that even reporting it was not much, because I grew up being told that because you're an orphan, you're already vulnerable. No one is going to take you in. And this is how it is at every orphanage. So you might as well get used to it if you want help, or get over it and you stay hungry forever. So she ended up accepting or agreeing to these sexual encounters. After supper, this I don't know if they're called wardens or these people that take care of them in the orphanages would come to her room, rape her, and then it went on and on and on and on for years. And they never spoke about it because this was already a person who had power over this child. And this is a voice of authority. If this voice of authority is telling you that if you report this, you're going to face the same thing, because what they'll do is they're just going to move you to another orphanage and you're going to face the same thing. So you're going to believe what they're going to tell you. So this is one of the contexts in which children go through sexual exploitation. The second one is we've also encountered cases or secluded cases of sexual exploitation that happens with there's humanitarian aid workers again. I think I would use, maybe this is an example of what happened in Chimanimani. I think a lot of people went there and they were giving a lot of assistance to that community, and stories would then start coming out. Oh, okay, so we have been here to get a tent, to get accommodation. You have to sort of subject yourself to something with these aid workers so that you get a safer place to stay in. But is it really safe?
Yes.
Because this person that is saying this to you is supposed to give you the service for free. And they're saying you're supposed to come and sleep with me first and then you get the safe tent. And some of these displaced camps, most of them, it happens a lot there, and child-headed families. Sexual exploitation is rife in such cases, because this child who has been left to fend up for her siblings or what has to, one, they can't work because the law in Zimbabwe doesn't really allow a child who is under 16 to have any form of work. So some of them, they end up looking for work anywhere and everywhere, and some of that work unfortunately comes with issues of sexual exploitation, because they're not recorded anyway. If a 16-year-old walks up to your house and says, I want work, I'll do anything. Maybe it's just for me to get a place to stay. I don't really need to get paid. I just need accommodation. For some people, they just take in these children and then they start exploiting them.
So when we're looking at the circumstances that put children susceptible to exploitation, you're looking at power dynamics, poverty. Could you unpack what you actually see in as being like the key drivers?
Okay, so I think number one key driver in the case of Zimbabwe is poverty. That is the honest truth. It's mostly poverty. I think we've been here before and we spoke to you about our figures that 72% of the survivors that we have seen since inception are adolescents and young people. And some of them, I think, are our sexual reproductive health nurse who explain to you that they are very adamant that they're in relationships. It has gotten to such an extent that they are very convinced that they are in relationships with these people.
Then when you're looking at the issue of poverty there, and you're saying this child is being exploited and is happening within the community, being taken advantage as a young person, and this person is coming to me and saying, do this, and then in exchange for, or I'm giving you this in exchange for. So you find the desperation that the young people have will push them to even agree, but they are not willing to do it, but circumstances are pushing them. How do we resolve that?
Okay, so right now we have been trying to do a lot of trainings and talking from our angle. We've got what we call sexual health advocates that we're training throughout the country, and these are more so peer educators in communities to at least be advocates of change where they are, and because this is specifically affecting young people and adolescents, we are then sending young people in adolescence to deal with this problem, talking amongst their peers, changing the conversation amongst themselves. If they teach each other, guys, I know you're desperate for this, because they might not necessarily tell an older person, because I think growing up, we've all had this, even you can't subject yourselves to this. But there is a language and a mutation of things that has happened among this group. They tell each other things that we don't know. They'll even tell each other, but it's just sex. I remember recently there was a conversation on Twitter this girl posted and said, my friend is saying that her driving instructor said in order for her to get a license, she must have to sleep with him, and then she gets a license. And in courts, she said, anyway, I'm thinking of doing it because it's just sex.
Goodness. Yeah.
So there's been that trivialization of things like, I'm just exchanging sex for a favor. It's not like I'll lose anything out of it. Such that for us to keep up, we might not even know what is really going on. They're 10 steps ahead. So we're sending these young people to say, send this message out there that it is sexual exploitation. If a service is supposed to be given,
Let it be given.
and it has its direct channels, let it be given. If those channels don't work, there are also other channels to report that this person wants me to pay in this kind for this service, and it is dealt with, because we risk having a society where nothing works straightforward.
Yes.
Everything has to be paid for in cash or kind. Everything, you have to bribe your way into things through sex, through payments. So this is the message that we're sending these advocates with, but we're also putting them out there as sort of like counselors in their communities.
Okay, Umbi. We will continue with our discussion after this short break. Our discussion on protection against sexual exploitation and abuse continues. Rumbi, I want to find out when a young person is being exploited by someone who is in a position of power, what options do they have for them to protect themselves from that abuse, places where they can go to report?
Okay, I think number one is what we have also been encouraging is for community-based mechanisms, like reporting mechanisms, because this is a problem that starts from community level. So if there are no social workers or community workers that can deal with this case, we always say rush to your nearest police station and specifically request for a victim-friendly unit officer. These are officers that are specially trained to deal with issues of sexual crimes, and they know how to maneuver with cases such as this. Because remember, sexual exploitation doesn't always necessarily say the act eventually happened, but just the suggestion of it is something that is considered unacceptable. It is a crime. So these are officers that understand the severity of these issues, and we always encourage people to rush there first.
When you are looking at the period that we are in, where we have COVID-19 causing all sorts of problems, we've lost many colleagues. I think almost every family now has lost someone to COVID-19. When you are looking at issues of sexual exploitation and abuse, how has COVID-19 impacted?
Okay, so COVID-19, I think, because we're still dealing with it, and we are still, even the experts are still trying to find their feet in how do we really deal with this problem. Number one, it has really made things difficult in terms of people that are affected by sexual abuse or sexual exploitation to actually report. Because before, pre-COVID, we had, you could go to church, you could go to school, you had access to other people. Right now, even visiting your neighbor is stay there. No, we were not taking visitors. People have signs at their gates, no visitors allowed. So you're in essence, people are on their own. We are physically distancing and socially distancing from each other. So people are not really reporting. We noticed last year in the first lockdown, the first intense lockdown, that a lot of cases started getting reported as the restrictions were being eased. People were coming out, and there were so many rapes that were now being reported. Now we're in the second intensive lockdown, and we've also seen that we had a lot of cases being reported soon after the festive season, Christmas holidays. And then the lockdown happened, now people are quiet again. We're trying to devise ways and strategies where survivors can report their cases without necessarily putting themselves at risks. So we've put our flyers, we've put information packs in grocery stores, we've put as much like stickers on our cars, just as people are driving by, they need to see, okay, so if I've been raped, what is this talking about? Because I mean, COVID really is, we are also working and learning as we go.
Yes.
And it has really made things complicated, even for programmers. But there are ways around it. And I think with all the strategies that we're working through, there could be a way out of it. Maybe not for everyone, but at least the majority of people are getting the information.
And what have you done as a way of addressing the challenges of sexual exploitation and abuse? I know you have touched here and there, but concretely, what have you done as ARC?
Okay, as ARC, we are number one, the trainings that we have done. I think we've also had multi-sectoral trainings with prosecutors just to understand, because these issues, they're not isolated. Even if we do as much work as possible, if the people that we work with in the victim friendly system, we're not aligned, it becomes a problem. So we're trying by all means to make this system a one, like to deal with this problem even on a systematic level. What are the prosecutors saying? What is the challenge when these issues come to the courts? What is really happening? So that even when these issues are being reported, we know and we are better off advising our survivors in a way that helps them. So we are doing the trainings, we're doing awareness and prevention. Right now, we are working in collaboration with the Minister of Information, doing mobile outreach programs, going into communities, even the hard to reach communities. We are going there and just sending out the messages whilst we're telling them to keep safe and maintain the social distancing, wear their masks. We are also saying, as you're in your houses and your homes, issues of sexual abuse, we know they're happening. People are being sexually exploited. Please speak up, don't keep quiet. Help is available. So these are some of the strategies, and we have been open throughout the COVID-19 lockdown periods. We're open on weekends. We've got doctors on standby who are offering services so that we always attend to survivors within 72 hours. Because I think, like I emphasized when we started this conversation, Terry, that ours is a survivor-centered approach. We are putting the survivor at the front. What does the survivor need? If the survivor needs shelter, we refer them. If the survivor needs legal advice, we refer them. But center to everything, the survivor, and they get all the help that they need.
What is your call to action for Zimbabweans?
Okay, my call to action is, let's start talking about consent in our homes. Let's start talking about or creating what I would call a consent culture. There is so much, there's so many rape myths out there. People just don't know when they are crossing the law. They just don't know when they're doing the wrong things. And there is so much information out there. And most of the time, people don't know it because they're not looking for it. But unfortunately, ignorance is not admissible in court. You can't claim that I did not know, therefore I raped someone. So let us educate ourselves. And if this has happened to you and you're watching this, there is a solution. You can get help. There are people who understand your situation and they're there to help you 24/7. Reach out to us on our toll-free lines. Reach out to us on WhatsApp, on our social media platforms. We're available to serve you.
Thank you very much, Rumbi. Well, as Zimbabweans, I'm sure we got the message where she's saying, let's make sure that in everything there is that consent. And in the event that you have been exploited, it's not the end of the world. There are places that you can actually go to seek advice, to seek medical help as well. Until next week, it's goodbye.